everybody and welcome back to my channel Query Solution. So in today's video we are going to discuss all the in-text questions which are given in the NCERT textbook with regards to the chapter life process. And when I'm saying in-text question, I mean you guys are able to understand that we are going to discuss the questions along with their solutions which are given within the chapter of the life process. Alright, so let's start with our video. So the first question which is available in NCERT is the question which is, why is diffusion insufficient to meet the oxygen requirement of multicellular organism like human? So before discussing the solution which is already available in front of you right now, I just want to point out few points here that whenever I guide my students to write answers for their board exams or any exams, I always encourage them to write their answers in key points. That's the reason if you would be looking at the answers or the solutions here, I have not written the answer in just one paragraph, because generally I have seen children, they write everything down in one lump mainly or in one paragraph. And in such a situation, what happens, children, is that sometimes you either don't highlight the keywords or the key point, and they are generally or sometimes happen is they get missed from getting corrected. So I don't want you to get into that trouble. So my advice always would be that write your answers in key points like this rather than writing your answer entirely in the whole paragraph. Secondly, whatever important keywords you feel within your answers, always try to highlight them like I have highlighted through writing them with the capital letters and underlining. So in whichever way you want to do it, but do highlight the important key line or the keywords in your answers as well. All right. So now let's discuss the solution to the question. So why is diffusion insufficient to meet the oxygen requirement of a multicellular organism like human? So what does the question states mainly? It's very simple, that in the case of human that we talk about, why we cannot exchange oxygen by a normal process which is diffusion. So we do know simple organisms, unicellular organisms exchange their oxygen mainly by diffusion, but we can't do it. So that's the reason we need to discuss why. So basically, the multicellular organisms such as human possess a complex body design. So we are a complex structure organisms mainly, and we have got specialized cells and tissues which are important for performing various necessary functions in our body, right? So I hope this line is and this point is clear to you all. Now, all the cells which are there in our body performing all the different functions will definitely require oxygen to function. So imagine we are a multicellular organism. We have got millions of cells, and all the cells in our body, in whichever part they are placed, they require oxygen to function. And these cells are not in the direct contact with the environment like we see in the case of a simple unicellular organism's body. This is the reason why we say that diffusion cannot meet our oxygen requirement, and that's not the way how we exchange oxygen in our body. All right, so these key points written here gives the answer and explanation to the question which is provided. Talking about the second question, what criteria do we use to decide whether something is alive? How can you say that something is alive in front of you or dead in front of you? So what is the answer now? So any visible movement such as walking, breathing or growing is generally used to decide whether something is alive or not, right? How do we say something is alive? We generally say if something is moving, something is breathing or something is growing, we generally say that these movements are alive. But that's not the way how we should actually be looking things at. Why? Because living organisms can also have movements which are not visible to the eyes. There are certain movements that happen that are not even visible to the eye. So it does not mean that if movement is not being visible means something is dead. So then what criteria should we actually use? So if we consider the presence of life processes, like we talk about digestion, we talk about respiration, or we talk about excretion, circulation, or any such important process, when we consider life processes as the fundamental criteria, that will be correct way to judge that whether something is alive or not. So that's the solution for this question now. Talking about the next question. What are the outside raw materials which are used by an organism? So what all material an organism use for the environment or from the environment or maybe from other for survival mainly? So we do know the first important raw material is food because it is the main source of energy and the materials that we get from it. The second important material is oxygen, which is used for breaking down to get energy, right? We do require oxygen for the process of oxidation of the food. And most importantly, we require water, which is used for digestion and other important functions. So these are just few that I have pointed out here. There are many more materials that organism depend and obtain from the environment as well, or from the outside. So you can add those materials or points too. But these raw materials that we are using, it require depending on the complexity of the organism's body and the surrounding mainly where it is surviving. So this is a solution for this question. All right. Next question. What process would you consider which are essential for maintaining life? Now, what is important for maintaining life? So, that's the entire thing we have discussed in the chapter itself. Various life processes that we talk about, like nutrition, respiration, circulation, digestion, excretion, these all are the important processes which are important for maintaining a healthy lifestyle of an organism. All right. So, that's the solution for this question. Talking about the next set of questions. So here it's a tabular differentiation that you can see between the differences of autotrophic and heterotrophic nutrition. So let's quickly see. So as we already know, what is autotrophic nutrition? It is a mode of nutrition in which organism produce its own food. While in heterotrophic, we do know that one organism depend on other organism for food. The examples of autotrophic mode of nutrition are plants, we do know, and that's why we say them as autotroph, because there is a difference between autotrophic and autotroph. What is autotrophic? So trophic is the mode of nutrition and autotroph are the example of the organism showing the process mainly. So don't get confused. So plants being the example of autotrophic nutrition, they make their own food and we do know by the process of photosynthesis. While animals, we do know they don't have any such process happening and that's why as we are saying they cannot make their own food. These autotrophic organisms like plants make their food by photosynthesis because they have structures like chloroplast, important cell organelle, which has the photosynthetic active pigment into them which is known as chlorophyll. While in the case of animals, there are no such structures present mainly. Since they make their own food, they are the one which are known as producers. And since we are depending on someone else for our nutrition, we are the one who are known as consumers. And these are the examples as you can see over here. All right, next question. Where do plant get each raw material which is required for photosynthesis? So if you remember when we were studying about the process of photosynthesis, we talked about all these four different raw materials that the plant required to perform the process. Sunlight is what we know that the plant is going to get from the sun and it will be absorbed by the chloroplast of the leaf so that it can be utilized for the process of photosynthesis. So be aware that sunlight will be absorbed by the chloroplast. Water and minerals, as we already know, will be absorbed by the roots of the plant and it will be transported till the leaf so that it will be utilized in the process of photosynthesis. The CO2, a very important gas, is definitely being taken up by the stomata, which are the minute openings on the surfaces of the leaf. And lastly, as we discussed, the chlorophyll. So already plant contains this photosynthetic active pigment and all these four raw materials when the plant is going to produce its own glucose, is also going to generate oxygen and also going to liberate out water molecules. That's what a photosynthesis process is all about. Okay. So these were about all the questions, children, with regards to the concept on nutrition. Now we are landing up on the questions which is on the topic related to the activities of digestion. So the first question now on digestion. What is the role of acid in stomach? So again, we have discussed in our video and we do know that in the human body and in the stomach of human body, there are gastric gland and they release acid. And I hope you remember here we are talking about the hydrochloric acid. So what is the importance of this acid is what is asked in the question. So what's the answer? So the hydrochloric acid, it creates an acidic environment in the stomach, which is very important. So definitely acid is going to make the environment of the stomach acidic in nature. But why is this acidic environment important? That's what is asked in the question. So two key points here. First, it is required for the activation of enzyme pepsin so that it can act on the different proteins which are found in the food. So, this is point number one, very, very important. And as you can see here, pepsin being an important enzyme produced by the gastric gland working on the substrate which is your protein. I have highlighted them as you can see here, and that's what I'm keeping on repeating. Do highlight answers with keywords or underlining or highlighter any way that you want in your answers also. And the second important key point, whatever acidic environment HCl is creating in the stomach, it will help in killing any germ or a microorganism that might have entered in our stomach through the food, so that it basically gets neutralized and we don't get any sorts of infection. So these are the two important key points when we talk about the role of acid in stomach. Talking about the next question related to digestion. So, what does the question states? So, what is the function of digestive enzymes? So, again, throughout the process of digestion, we have studied about different enzymes which are secreted from different parts of the alimentary canal. So, this question is asking a general function of enzymes. So, let us see what's the answer. The digestive enzymes helps in breaking down the complex substances in the food into simple substances, right? That's the main job the enzymes are doing. They help in the process of digestion. They would increase the rate of reaction. That's the major job of enzymes mainly. So what complex substances do we eat in food? So we are eating carbohydrates, which gets converted into simple forms, which is sugar. We are eating proteins which gets converted into simple forms which are known as amino acids, and we do eat fats and lipids which gets converted into simple versions known as fatty acid and glycerol, right? So this is the answer to the question, that it helps in breaking down the reaction. And also you can add a key point here which I have not mentioned, that it increases the rate of reaction as well. That's another key point you can add here. All right, next question. So, how is the small intestine designed to absorb the digested food? So, let's understand the question first. What is the question saying? So, how is the small intestine designed? What is the basic design of a small intestine that helps in the absorption of digested food? So, we are first of all very well clear, children, that small intestine is the part in human body which is responsible for the absorption of the food. And what type of food? So, the digested food. Why digested food again? Because we do know again, small intestine is the part where maximum process, or we can say the process of complete digestion takes place. So here we do know small intestine is a highly coiled structure mainly in our body, and they have got association with small finger like projections. We have studied in the video, so I hope you remember. They have got small finger like projections all throughout the small intestines which are known as villi, and this is where villi are going to play important part. So what do they do? Let's see in the answer. So the small intestine has numerous finger-like projections which are known as villi. And what do villi do? So these villi helps in increasing the surface area for the absorption of the digested food throughout the lining of the intestine. So villi in the small intestine mainly will increase the surface area so that more and more of digested food is absorbed into it mainly. And when what next it will do? So these villi are in close contact with the blood. So these villi we do know are now going to transfer this digested food from the villi into the blood. And what is this blood going to do? So now the blood which has got all the digested food materials into it will transport it to the different cells of our body. So here we are coming back to the previous question that we asked, oxygen requirement, why diffusion cannot meet, right? It's again related. Here the blood will carry your oxygen. The blood is the substance which is carrying your digested food, and carrying all these materials, the blood will transport the materials to different cells of your body. And then what is the cell going to do? So the cell is going to perform the process of assimilation, or we can also say the process of oxidation of the food. And ultimately what is that going to result into? So that is going to result in generation of energy rich molecules, which is nothing but the ATP. So just to give you a quick idea here, I know I'm interrupting myself, but I want to make this point clear. Just by eating the food, you don't get energy. If you think you have eaten dal, rice, or roti, or whatsoever, so eating is giving you food, so no. Just by eating, you have given a source to your body. Your body is going to digest that food by the process of digestion. And when this digested food is going to burn, when this digested food is going to get oxidized through the process of respiration, then your food what gets energy from mainly. So digestion is not the only thing. Along with digestion, along with respiration, also along with the action of your blood, when all these processes happen at the same time in your body, that's when your body releases the energy out of the food. So be clear on that part. Okay. Now, talking about another set of question. So, the question is, what advantage over an aquatic organism does a terrestrial organism have? So, be clear. What does the question says? What advantage over an aquatic organism does a terrestrial organism have with regards to obtaining oxygen for respiration? So, what is advantage a terrestrial organism is getting in getting oxygen mainly as compared to the aquatic organism? So let us see. So terrestrial organisms, first of all, we do know are the one which lives on land. Aquatic are the one which lives in water. So I hope that's clear to you all. So terrestrial organisms obtain oxygen directly through the air. Like just consider animals like us, human. What are we doing? So we are getting our oxygen directly through the air, right? So that's the same thing here we are talking, that we are the organisms which get oxygen directly through the air, and this oxygen which is available in the air, children, is in a high quantity. That's the important key point here. But when you talk about the aquatic organism, how do they get their oxygen from? So they get the oxygen from the water, which is in the dissolved form. And already when we are talking about the oxygen in dissolved form, it is available in a lesser quantity. So in a way, if we are saying we are directly taking from the air more in quantity, aquatic organisms are taking through the water in the dissolved version but lesser in quantity. So we do can definitely infer out of this that this, because of this very same reason, the terrestrial organisms are more advantageous in getting the oxygen as compared to the aquatic organisms. All right. Now, next, what does the question says? So, what are the different ways in which glucose is utilized in providing energy to various organisms? So this is an entire chart, children, in the concept of respiration that we have talked about. So we do know that whenever respiration is happening, we do require two important substances. We require first of all the digested food so that it can be oxidized, and secondly we require oxygen, right? These two raw materials is what we require. And where is the place oxidation is going to happen? So this happen at the cellular level. So your blood has to bring the oxygen, your blood has to bring the digested food to all the cells of your body, so that here the cells can actually try to oxidize the food and get energy out of it. That's what is respiration is all about, right? So the digested food is nothing but your glucose, right? But we do know that whenever respiration is happening, this glucose here, which is a 6 carbon compound molecule, will first of all be broken down into a 3 carbon compound molecule, which is known as pyruvate. And this breaking down of glucose into pyruvate is something that we say as glycolysis. So you don't need to understand glycolysis in detail, but at least this keyword you should be aware on. So glycolysis is basically the process where in the cytoplasm of the cell, the glucose gets broken down into pyruvate. Now, what is next once it's broken down? Pyruvate is not going to give us energy. Now, if the organism's body contains oxygen, as you can see here a plus sign, or if the organism body contains no oxygen, where you can see a negative sign, or if the organism's body consists of a lack of oxygen stage. So depending on the availability of the oxygen, this pyruvate will next be broken down further to release energy in different version, and that's what is known as the Krebs cycle. So we don't need to understand Krebs cycle in detail, but at least this much should be aware, that when pyruvate gets broken down into different versions to produce energy, that something is what we say as a Krebs cycle. So we do have learned about this by now, that if in the absence of oxygen pyruvate is breaking down, it gets broken up into alcohol, which is ethanol, along with CO2 and ATP molecules, and only two ATP molecules. That's why we say this process of respiration being anaerobic, as incomplete oxidation. If the pyruvate is breaking down in the presence of oxygen, then it leads to complete oxidation, and this results in generation of CO2 water along with 38 ATPs of molecules. So imagine how high the ATP molecules are. And if the pyruvate molecules gets oxidized in the condition where the oxygen concentration is lesser, in that condition the oxygen gets broken down into a component which is known as lactic acid. Along with that, it will also release energy, but in again a lesser number. So this is the fate of glucose mainly, because of which it can come into different versions, it can convert into different versions to get energy based on the availability, inavailability or insufficiency of oxygen. So this is the entire flowchart explaining us the question about it. Alright, next question now. How is oxygen and carbon dioxide transported in the lungs mainly, or in the human beings, I'm sorry. So the respiratory pigment known as hemoglobin helps in the transportation of gases. That's what we are talking about. Blood is going to transport the gases in our body, right? And blood consists of an important respiratory pigment which is known as hemoglobin, which is going to do this job for us. So hemoglobin, when it combines with the oxygen, it forms a combination which is known as oxyhemoglobin, which is transported to the cells of our body for the process of aerobic respiration or assimilation or oxidation to happen. And that's what we just now discussed in the previous question also. Now, once respiration is done, once the blood has transported the glucose, once the blood has transported the oxygen to the cells have performed respiration by now, irrespective of aerobic, anaerobic or lactic acid fermentation that would have happened, the result, or there would be some end product mainly which the respiration process is generating. And most importantly, as we have seen in the previous video, previous question, here the major gas which is evolved is CO2. Before respiration it was oxygen. After respiration it's carbon dioxide. So the now what is next thing that is going to happen? So the same hemoglobin now is going to mix up with the carbon dioxide which is produced to form a combination which is known as carboxyhemoglobin. And why does this combines with CO2 again? So we do know that we are, or the body's hemoglobin is trying to remove this CO2, because if more CO2 gets accumulated, it will generate toxicity in our body, right? So this CO2 combined with hemoglobin will be released to the lungs of our body, and then by the process of exhalation mainly, we exhale out a gas which is carbon dioxide. So when we were breathing in, we breathe in oxygen. Our body utilizes the oxygen for respiration, and once respiration is done, the blood is again, the hemoglobin is again going to mix with CO2, bring it back to the lungs, and then by the process of exhalation is what we are going to give out the CO2. Alright, so our next important question. How are lungs designed in human beings to maximize the area for the exchange of gases? So a simple question again. What's the answer to that? So the trachea that enters in each lung, we do know that we have got pair of lungs mainly, and there is a common pipe which is known as trachea, also known as the windpipe, which divides into two before it enter in left and right lung in our body, right? So that's what we are talking about. So the trachea that enters in each of the lung divides into bronchi first of all, bronchioles, and later and finally it divides into tiny sac-like structures which are known as alveoli. So what is the importance of alveoli? These alveoli are thin walled first of all. They are not thick, but they are very thin walled, and these are associated with the blood vessels of our body. That's what we talked in this question also, that here the oxygen and CO2 will be exchanged based on the blood which is an association with your respiratory system. So here what is actually helping in this exchange? So basically the alveoli which are there in your lung being associated with the blood vessels will increase the surface area for the exchange of these gases, irrespective it's oxygen or irrespective it is CO2, and it will allow an efficient diffusion of the gases to takes place, and thus by the process of exhalation or inhalation these gases would either be taken in or would be taken out. So this is a simple answer to a very complex question but very important question also. So just to add children here, I am not explaining all the concepts regarding the answers to you because this is what we have entirely studied in all our videos. So if you want to understand a concept, you have to go to the videos on my channel and there you have to understand the concept. Here I'm only going to talk about the important key points, that how you should write a question or how you should write an answer in exam if such questions are asked to you. Okay. So now we have got questions related to circulatory system. So let's see that. What is the first question on circulatory system states? So the question is, what are the components of transport system in human beings? So we are talking about the circulatory system in human being right now. What are the components of it? Along with the naming of component, what are the functions of the component? We also have to talk. So the main component of the transport system or circulatory system in human beings are three important parts. The first one is an important organ, which is the heart. And what does the heart do? So the heart pumps the oxygenated blood throughout the body and it receives the deoxygenated blood from various body parts and send it back to the lungs for oxygenation. So this is what the job of heart is. Heart is not going to produce the blood, but the heart's job is to pump the blood to all part of your body and bring back the deoxygenated blood back to the lungs so that the blood can become oxygenated again, right? That's the job of heart. Secondly, the part of transport system also includes your fluid, which is blood. So we do know what is blood. So it is a fluid connective tissue, right? I hope you guys know blood is your tissue in a body. So blood is basically a fluid connective tissue which helps in the transportation of oxygen, nutrients, carbon dioxide, hormones, waste, etc. Along with this, we do know the important components again are your blood vessels, which include your arteries, veins, and capillaries, and they help in the transportation of blood, which is pumped by the heart to various body parts, and from the various body parts to heart and lungs again. So these are all the three important components of the transport system in human beings and the functions that we have discussed here. All right. Next question. Why it is necessary to separate oxygenated and deoxygenated blood in mammals and birds? So just to add you here, we have not studied about the circulatory system of bird, but we have studied the condition of circulatory system in human. And we do know that in our heart is four chambered, and especially the left and the right side of the heart are separated from each other by septum, if you remember that, right? Why do we have a separation? I said the answer to you at that time also in the video, that this separation will not allow mixing of the blood to happen, right? So that's the question asked. Why it is necessary that blood should not mix together? Why oxygenated and deoxygenated blood should be separate and should not be mixed? So let's see the answer now. So warm-blooded animals. So I hope you know by now what's warm-blooded and cold-blooded animals. So warm-blooded animals like mammals and birds, they maintain a constant body temperature. Your body and my body is maintaining a constant temperature of our body. Even if it's 0 degree outside, our body will try that maximize our body temperature should be controlled. So that's what we are saying. We are warm blooded and our body maintains a constant body temperature irrespective to the temperature of the environment. And even after having this, we still try to have an active lifestyle and a high metabolic rate. Hence, we require oxygen for cellular respiration in a higher concentration so that constantly we get a supply of energy. So basically, to maintain a body temperature, to maintain an active lifestyle, to maintain a high metabolic rate, what do we require? So we require a constant supply of energy to happen. We require a constant supply of oxygen so that respiration can happen and we get energy out of it. And separation of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood will improve the efficiency of this circulatory system, which will help us in maintaining all the important body processes that we are discussing above in the question. So this is the answer to a simple question again, that we have understood why separation is required so that body temperature gets maintained. We keep maintaining a healthy lifestyle, we keep having a high metabolic rate, all the important body processes keeps happening, because if mixing would happen, all these processes would hamper mainly. So separation is there, all these processes are happening efficiently at their own rate in our body. That's why separation is important. Okay. Now next we are talking about the questions related to transportation in plants. So what's the question? What are the components of the transport system in highly organized plant? Now we are talking about the components of plant transporting system. So again, in highly organized plant, we do know that they have got conducting tissues which help in the transportation of materials. And we do know that in plants, when we are talking about conducting tissues, so we are talking about xylem and the phloem. So what does xylem do? Xylem helps in the transportation of water and mineral, and from where? So from roots to the shoots of the plant. And phloem, as we know, it helps in the transportation of food, which is nothing but the sugars, amino acid. And from where? So from leaves to various parts of the plant. And this we have entirely discussed in detail also in our video. Question is, how are water and mineral transported in plant? So just now, as we have seen in the previous question, that xylem is responsible for the transportation of water mainly. So what components of xylem? So the tracheids and vessels which are there in the root stems and leaves, they all interconnect. All these tracheids and vessels interconnect to form basically a water conducting channel, and this channel reach to each and every part of the plant. So your tracheids and vessels of the xylem have created a channel mainly through which the water is going to transport. Now, what happens is when the transpiration creates a suction pull, this results in the water to get its entry into the different xylem cells of the roots, and then through the water channel, there is like a steady movement of water that happens from the root xylem to all the parts of the plant. So, this is the way how plants mainly gets water transportation from one part of the plant body to the other. The next question is very obvious again. So then how is food transported in the plant? So as we know that phloem will be responsible for the transportation of food from the plant, and mainly from the leaves where it is produced, which is also known as the source, to the part where it is needed, which is known as the sink. That's why whenever we talk about transportation of food, we talk about in terms of source to sink theory, right? So how does this process entirely occur? So first of all, the transportation of food, when it occurs actively, that is by utilizing energy molecules from the plant body itself. So when the energy molecules are utilized, this creates an osmotic pressure in the tissue which causes the water trying to balance the osmotic pressure. But as the pressure moves the material in the phloem having high pressure to the tissues with lower pressure, so it will keep moving the materials from the area where pressure is higher to the areas where pressure is lower. Thus, this process helps in the movement of food according to the need of the plant, because wherever there is a need, the pressure would be lesser, and wherever there is the source, the pressure would be higher because actively the food has been loaded over there. And as I said you, this process will keep on repeating, and based on source to sink theory as we talked just now, the food will be transported via phloem in the plant body. Okay. So dealing with the next question now, talking about the concept of excretion. So a very possible 5-mark question, children. So be aware about all these key points that we are talking about. So the question is, describe the structure and functioning of the nephron. So nephrons, as we know, are the structural and the functional unit which are there in kidneys, and they are present in millions of numbers in the kidney. In each kidney they are there in millions of number. So the main component of nephrons includes what? So it includes Bowman's capsule, it includes the blood network of blood capillaries which is glomerulus, and the tubular part of the nephrons which are proximal convoluted tubule known as PCT, the distal convoluted tubule known as DCT, and the loop of Henle which is the U-shaped part. The cup-shaped structure is something which is known as the Bowman's capsule as we talked. The Bowman's capsule contain networks of blood capillaries which are known as the glomerulus, and the tubular part which is close to the Bowman's capsule is known as PCT. The U-shaped bend area is something that's known as loop of Henle, and the part which is closer to the collecting duct, or we say is away from the Bowman's capsule, is something which is known as the DCT or the distal convoluted tubules. So these are the structural details, and along with the structural detail you have to draw the diagram also. What are the different functions of the nephron mainly? So the blood enters the kidney through the renal artery which branches into many capillaries inside the Bowman's capsule which is known as the glomerulus. The blood is filtered with very high pressure inside the Bowman's capsule, and that stage is we what already studied known as the stage of ultrafiltration. The materials like water and solutes pass through the glomerulus and enter in the tubular regions of the nephron. Now, in the tubular part mainly, in the PCT and in the loop of Henle, materials like amino acids, glucose, water, salts, these are reabsorbed back by the body because these materials body would require them back. And that's your stage number 2 in the process of urine formation. Stage number 1 was ultrafiltration. Stage number 2 is your selectively reabsorption. And whatever now the waste which is remained, which the body does not want, mainly comes in a form which is known as urine, which enters in the distal part of the tubular structures and followed by the collecting duct, a stage which is known as the secretion. So this makes up our third stage of urine formation. This urine is next poured from the collecting duct into the ureters, into the urinary bladder, and then finally through the opening which is urethra, the urine will be expelled out of our body by the process which is known as micturition. So this is again a very possible 1 mark question. What is micturition? So you should be aware it's the process where the urine is expelled out of the body. So this question, in this we have discussed entirely the structural and the functional detail. And this is what the diagram of nephron is, which you have to learn to draw for your exams also. So there is a playlist available on my channel for especially the diagrams where I'm showing you how all these diagrams are drawn. You can check out all those lists, and this is what the diagrammatic representation of a nephron looks like. All right. Okay, talking about the next question. I hope these are the last 2 questions. Yes. So, what are the methods used by the plant to get rid of the excretory product? So, in a very simple way, if we say this question as, so what are the different ways how plant release excretory waste products out of their body? So, there are different ways how plant remove them. Unlike animals, as we have a developed system, they don't have such important organs and all, but how do they release the waste then? So plant get rid of excess water by the process of transpiration. That's one example. Plants store waste products in the vacuoles and the dead cells, and these are ultimately removed from the body by falling the certain parts of plants like leaves and fruits. So they would store the material and then that part of the plant would fall off. So that's how they'll remove the waste. Some of the waste, these are stored in the forms of resins and gums, which are especially in the old xylem part mainly, and plant released wastes in the soil as well around them. So these are few ways how which the plant can remove the waste material that get accumulated in their body. The last question again, how is the amount of urine produced regulated? So this is again a concept we have covered in our video. So the amount of urine produced depends on the amount of water and the dissolved waste which is present in the body, first of all. And secondly, as we know, there is a hormone which is known as the antidiuretic hormone, which plays a very important role in regulating the water balance in our body by either releasing a urine which is very diluted or either releasing a urine which is very concentrated. So with this children, we have talked about the solutions with regards to all the important in-text questions which are given in NCERT. If you want me to make video on the back exercise question of NCERT as well, you can comment to me in the comment section box and I'll be making a separate video on that part as well. If you're liking my video, do give a thumbs up, show me some motivation to work further for you guys. And as I always say, until then, happy learning everybody. Have a good day ahead.